Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Jayapal, and greetings to the witnesses. Donald Trump's ruinous tariffs and calamitous trade war against the world, except for Russia, have crashed the stock market and cost American workers and retirees and farmers $11 trillion in 1 week. 1 week. And the Republican majority in the House could stop this nightmare today by exercising our powers over international commerce. But they prefer to own the tariffs and own the trade war. We'll see how well that works out for them going into the future. It's certainly not working out well for the American people. Now desperate to displace attention from this world historical economic debacle and the fact that courts have struck down more than 55 of their lawless, unconstitutional executive orders and actions, they invite us to discuss again immigration. So be it. In New York City, Donald Trump's deportation force grabbed green card holder Mahmoud Khalil for exercising his First Amendment rights in a way that Donald Trump disapproved of. Now they're trying to deport him, as well as other students across the country, using a McCarthy-era statute that the president's own sister, Judge Marianne Trump Berry, declared to be, quote, unconstitutional on its face. Then they tried to extra-legally deport more than 100 Venezuelans, shackling them and putting them on planes bound to a self-proclaimed dictator's infamous mega prison in El Salvador under cover of night based on an 18th century law about wartime authorities called the Alien Enemies Act, which palpably did not apply to this case because we are at peacetime. Congress still has the power to declare war under our Constitution, not the president. Despite their best efforts to keep these removals a secret until it was too late, attorneys for people on the plane filed a lawsuit, and Judge Boasberg, a George W. Bush appointee, issued an order to stop the removals while the planes were hurrying to get in the air and were still in the air. Today, the judge in that case will likely decide whether or not to hold the administration in contempt for deliberately defying the order to turn the removal flights around. On one of those flights, the administration deported Kilmar Garcia, a Maryland man, a father and husband to an American citizen, American citizens who had a legal status called withholding of removal, a legal immigration status that specifically blocked him from being removed to El Salvador. He won this status after the government falsely accused him of being a gang member and tried to deport him during the first Trump administration in 2019. Instead, he was able to prove that he posed no threat to public safety and that, on the contrary, he had a well-founded fear of persecution from the violent gangs back in El Salvador. The first Trump administration respected that ruling, but in this second iteration, the administration violated its legal obligation and shipped him off to the Salvadoran mega prison to be locked up in a cage with the very gang members whose violence he had escaped. The administration admitted in court that this deportation, which had absolutely no legal basis, was done in, quote, administrative error. And a judge ordered them to return Mr. Garcia to the United States by midnight this Monday. Rather than bring back the man they admitted they had wrongfully deported, the administration placed the attorney who argued the case on leave and decided to double down and appeal the order. We've seen the administration conduct indiscriminate raids that round up people with no criminal records, who've lived in our country for decades, who own homes and pay taxes, whose family members are U.S. citizens, and who pose no threat to public safety. U.S. citizens have even been arrested and detained by the deportation force as part of these reckless and lawless raids. Now the administration is trying to force state and local law enforcement agencies to use their time, their money, and their resources to participate in these raids. But under Article 1, Congress has exclusive power over naturalization and immigration. And under the 10th Amendment, the federal government has no power to, quote, commandeer the machinery, personnel, or resources of the state and local government for federal law enforcement purposes. But the administration is using threats and coercion now to try to force state and local governments and police departments to use their limited resources to arrest and detain students, fathers, mothers, and law-abiding community members, which means fewer cops, less money, fewer resources to focus on protecting communities from actual violent threats and gangs and the scourge of gun violence and drugs and drunk driving and so on. There's no power in our Constitution to do that, something I thought our colleagues believed in and respected in the system of American federalism. These authoritarian policies have nothing to do with law and order. They're about intimidation and retaliation against disfavored populations, state and local governments, immigrant communities, students, lawyers who dare oppose the administration in court, and judges who stand up to rule against Trump's continuing reign of unlawful actions. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We'll now introduce today's witnesses, and I'll begin by deferring to Mr. Baumgartner to introduce our first witness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to introduce the outstanding Sheriff of Adams County, Mr. Dale Wagner. Sheriff Wagner is a respected law enforcement leader who made the decision to cooperate with federal immigration authorities to protect his community. Adams County is a small rural county in eastern Washington that I have the privilege to represent. Its people are the best of our district and indeed the best of America, and it is Dale Wagner in which they have put their trust to enforce laws and protect their community. And for that, Dale Wagner now finds himself the target of a legal campaign by our
Mr. Chairman, this is not an introduction. So if the gentleman from my home state of Washington, my colleague, would like to introduce the sheriff, he's welcome to do that, but he is not on this committee, and he's solely here for the purpose of introducing the sheriff.
Points well taken.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman is not complying with your order.
We'll suspend. The gentle lady is correct in her point of order. The unanimous consent covers an introduction without editorial comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed in order. For what purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Baumgartner, question?
No, not at this moment in the proceeding.
He had me all interested in this county.
Again, the gentleman is recognized to make an introduction. That is what is in order at this time.
I'll keep it brief, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. We're very pleased that Adams County Sheriff Dale Wagner is here, and I would just also point out we have 8 outstanding sheriffs in the state of Washington dealing with the fentanyl scourge here with us as well today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Our other witnesses are Mrs. Danielle Carter-Williams. Ms. Carter-Williams is a Chicago resident and fitness trainer who advocates for Chicago residents. She serves as vice president of Chicago Flips Red, a grassroots movement dedicated to empowering communities across Chicago to embrace bold, conservative solutions for a brighter future. Our third witness is Mr. Neil Franklin. Major Franklin retired from law enforcement after a combined total of 34 years in the Baltimore and Maryland State Police Departments. He is currently the executive director of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And finally, we have Mr. R.J. Howman. Mr. Howman is president of the National Immigration Center for Enforcement. He's also a founder of the boutique firm Stryker Strategies and is a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center. He's worked in immigration enforcement policy for more than a decade, including at the Federation for American Immigration Reform. I want to welcome all of our witnesses today, thank them for appearing. We'll begin by swearing you in, so would you please rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please know that your written testimony will be entered in the record in its entirety, and accordingly, we'd ask that you summarize your oral testimony in 5 minutes. And we will begin with Sheriff Wagner.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Good morning. My name is Sheriff Dale Wagner, and I have dedicated my career to serving the people of Washington State. Law enforcement today faces unprecedented challenges, many of which stem from political agendas, rather than public safety concerns. One of the most pressing issues in this conflict between Washington State, Keep Washington Working Act, and sanctuary policies, and federal immigration laws, a situation that places all sheriffs in our state in an impossible position. Recently, Adams County became the target of a lawsuit of Washington State Attorney General, alleging violations of Keep Washington Working Act. or sanctuary policies. This lawsuit is not about justice or protecting communities. It's about enforcing a political agenda that restricts law enforcement's ability to cooperate with federal authorities. Adams County is a hardworking community built on agriculture, perseverance, and a strong family values. Spanning approximately 1,925 square miles in eastern Washington, our county is home to farmers, ranchers, and business owners who contribute daily to our state's economy. The people of Adams County are resilient and committed to maintaining a safe and prosperous home for future and family. Our office operations by principle of service above self, and we police who we love. Those are our friends and our family and our neighbors. These sanctuary policies prohibit law enforcement from working with federal immigration agencies such as ICE and Border Patrol. Even when individuals in custody have committed serious crimes beyond immigration violations, we are barred from notifying federal agencies or authorities upon their release. The result, repeat offenders, drug traffickers, and violent criminals, and they remain in our communities instead of facing appropriate legal action. While proponents claim sanctuary policies protect vulnerable populations, they also shield repeat offenders who exploit the system. Criminal organizations, including drug cartels, human traffickers, take advantage of these policies, knowing they face minimal risk of deportation, even when caught committing additional crimes. These sanctuary policies create confusion and fear among law-abiding residents and citizens. The public is misled into believing local law enforcement arrests people solely based on immigration status. This is not true. It's not true in my county. Our office, like others across the state, do not arrest individuals based on immigration status. Yet, the policies create barriers that prevent victims and witnesses from reporting crimes, fearing potential of immigration consequences they do not fully understand. This makes it harder for law enforcement to investigate crimes and protect the community. Sheriffs are sworn to uphold the law and protect public safety. However, sanctuary policies place us in a legal bind, forcing us to navigate conflicting state and federal laws. We must follow the state mandate that contradicts federal law, compromising our ability to enforce laws effectively. Instead of focusing on crime prevention, we are caught in the unnecessary legal battles that are wasting tax dollars and divert resources from critical public safety efforts. When law enforcement cannot address repeat criminal activity effectively, families, businesses, and their entire communities suffer. Hardworking residents should not have to live in fear of criminals who exploit policies designed to shield them from accountability. Public safety is a must and our priority, not political agendas. Rather than allowing law enforcement agencies to work at local, state, and federal levels together, sanctuary policies force us to rearrest individuals who could have been transferred to federal custody. This strains our jails, wastes tax money, and puts residents at unnecessary risk. The solution is not to pit state and federal authorities against one another, but to ensure public safety remains a top priority for everyone. Law enforcement should be allowed to do its job without political interference. We must defend the constitutional authority of sheriffs and enforce the laws that we protect our citizens with. We advocate for policies that support law enforcement effort rather than hinder them. Continue hiring and training the best deputies and police officers to uphold the highest standard of professionalism and integrity. Work with local, state, and federal law enforcement and community partners to maintain safe neighborhoods and prioritize security over politics. The people of Adams County have always supported law enforcement, and we are proud to serve our community that values law and order. Despite these challenges, we remain steadfast in our mission to serve and protect. We will not back down from our responsibility to uphold the law and keep our residents safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next witness is Major Franklin. You may begin.
Good morning, Chairman McClintock. Honorable committee members, thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Major Neil Franklin. I am retired. I'm here today representing myself, having served a 34-year law enforcement career in the Baltimore Police Department and the Maryland State Police, as well as representing the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, LEAP, where I was the executive director for an additional 10 years post-retirement. Lieutenant Diane Goldstein is now the current executive director. LEAP is a nonprofit law enforcement, nonprofit group of police prosecutors, judges, other criminal justice professionals who speak from firsthand experience. Our mission is to make communities safer by focusing law enforcement resources on the greatest threats to public safety and working toward improving police-community relations. While we strongly believe that effective border security is imperative to public safety, we adamantly oppose any proposals that will push sanctuary cities and mandate state and local law enforcement to play a significant role in enforcement of federal immigration law. We believe routine civil immigration enforcement by local officers would harm public safety by eroding police community trust and diverting law enforcement resources away from tackling more serious crime. Ordering state and local law enforcement to act as ICE agents would deeply damage police community trust that we depend upon to do our jobs effectively. Across policing, the research underscores that having trust from the people we serve directly impacts public safety. Police are only as strong as the relationships we have with the public. We can only prevent, detect, and solve crimes if witnesses and victims are willing to come forward to report criminal activity and work with us to address it. A report on Latino perceptions of police found that 44% of Latinos hesitate to report crime to police for fear that it could lead to investigations into immigration status of their family or community members, even if they are legal citizens. Compelling local police to enforce federal immigration law would only further damage community trust, making victims, witnesses, and other residents less likely to report crimes or provide critical information to help us solve them. Forcing local law enforcement to act as federal immigration agents would also divert their focus away from the greatest threats to public safety. Local law enforcement should not be forced to dedicate precious time and resources toward burdensome information sharing and detainer requirements instead of solving serious crime. It would lead to countless people being detained for extended periods solely based upon their immigration status, wasting limited jail space that should be reserved for those who pose the most serious threats to public safety. Proposed bans to sanctuary cities also pose constitutional and civil liabilities for local police departments and jails, exposing them to costly lawsuits that could further drain their already stretched resources. Many cities across the country have been forced to pay massive settlements for illegally holding people based upon requested ICE detainers, a practice that would become more frequent as police hope to avoid cuts to essential federal programs in their communities. For example, New York City recently agreed to a $92.5 million settlement stemming from a lawsuit claiming authorities had detained 20,000 people for days, weeks, even months after their scheduled release date due to ICE detainer requests. The proposed act would put state and local governments in an impossible position of deciding between risking cuts to essential federal programs or inviting potential legal action for violating the civil rights of their community members. Furthermore, one solution does not fit all. Cities and towns are unique with very different needs, requiring different solutions for various problems. Each community should be free to design its own strategies absent sanctions of any kind from the federal government. We are deeply concerned to see the federal government considering blocking federal funds to sanctuary jurisdictions and mandating local law enforcement to act as ICE agents. Forcing local police to act as federal immigration agents would harm public safety by eroding community trust and diverting critical resources away from more serious crime. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you for your testimony. I will next hear from Ms. Carter Walters.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and esteemed members of the subcommittee. And thank you to President Donald J. Trump, the people's president, for giving Chicago Flips Red our first platform and to the subcommittee for the opportunity to speak truth in the people's house. We proudly stand with our president to bring his message to the Black American community and expose the lies pushed by the Democrat Party and the fake news media. We are here to confront the reality of sanctuary cities. Despite the word sanctuaries, these cities are anything but safe. Chicago has claimed the title for years, and now we're drowning in the consequences. Lifelong residents are pushed aside, schools are overcrowded, crime is out of control, and affordable housing is vanishing. This crisis exploded under Biden and were worsened by the reckless, agenda-driven leadership of Lori Lightfoot and Brandon Johnson. They didn't just ignore the collapse, they fueled it. In December 2023, a few aldermen tried to give us a voice, but the mayor and his allies used systematic stunts to block the vote on a non-binding sanctuary city referendum, silencing Chicagoans and stripping us of our right to choose. Every elected official swears an oath to serve their constituents and uphold the Constitution. Brandon Johnson has failed. He's dismissed that oath in his obsession with keeping Chicago a sanctuary for illegal aliens. He's driven our city into $1 billion deficit, handed out shady non-bid contracts, and funneled over $6 million into services for illegal aliens. That's why we demand a full forensic audit focused on migrant-related spending. This isn't mismanagement, it's organized looting of taxpayer dollars. ShotSpotter, a life-saving gunshot detection tool, is gone. Hyde Park now bears a permanent 720-bed shelter as illegal alien shelters multiply all over our city. Tax increment financing, known as TIF, meant to revive struggling areas, are being embezzled. Our kids aren't learning to read, while the city teachers cater to non-English speakers. These are deliberate acts of neglect, justified by Chicago's sanctuary city status. Lori Lightfoot licked the fuse with executive orders, and DEI Johnson poured gasoline on the fire. Field houses has been taken, police stations overrun with illegal aliens in tents and are on the floors, leaving officers demoralized. My husband, a retired CPD officer, saw it all. Violence, disease, measles and tuberculosis outbreak, prostitution, and bed bugs that reached our home. Since 2025, over 51,000 illegal aliens have flooded into Chicago. The city's answer? Blend migrant and homeless shelters under the One System initiative and hope no one noticed. Homelessness has jumped by 207% as 2,100 beds go to illegal aliens. When state funding ends in 2025, corrupt insiders will pass the contracts among themselves. This isn't policies, it's racketeering. My husband and I are tax-paying business owners. We did everything right. We invested in the Opportunity Zone. Thank you, President Trump. Applied for grants, and we were denied. Yet, 140,000 illegal alien-run businesses were funded without question. Law-abiding citizens are being replaced to serve a political machine. MS-13, Trendy Agua, they're here. Their graffiti marks our neighborhoods. New gangs, the Venezuelan Disciple, is forming in our neighborhoods. One shelter gets 20 to 30 police calls daily. drug use, harassment, loitering, and violence have turned parks, sidewalks, and porches into no-go zones. This isn't immigration. This is an invasion. Sanctuary cities do not protect us, they abandon us. The citizens of Chicago, we demand a full forensic
Ms. Carter
audit
Walters?
of every dollar tied to
Ms. Carter
migrant.
Walters, very much appreciate your testimony, but we have to limit it to 5 minutes. But you'll have an opportunity to expand on those remarks during the question period. So appreciate your testimony.
Okay.
And we'll finish with Mr. R.J. Hallman.
Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Jayapal, and esteemed members of this subcommittee, I come before you today to discuss a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our great nation, a crisis that's been born of reckless policies that jeopardize the safety of our communities and shred the integrity of our immigration system. You know, the sacred duty of any government is to shield its law-abiding citizens from harm. It's the bedrock of why we submit to governance, why we uphold the laws that bind us together. We cherish our families, our neighbors, our way of life, and we trust that the law will stand as our shield, a unifying force that levels the field for all. That's what sets America apart, our reverence for the rule of law. So profound that we demand every aspiring citizen to swear an oath steeped in its honor. But that system has betrayed too many of our people. It's not some abstract debate about legal nuance or political gamesmanship. It's talking the safety and security of our nation. We face a stark reality right now, even with President Trump in office. There are millions of illegal aliens roaming free among us. Some are on ICE radar, 98% aren't. They're nearly all in the shadows. There's criminals, those with final orders of removal who went through due process, 1.4 million of them. And then there's the unknown. And then worse, you have hundreds of so-called sanctuaries. They roll out the red carpet for these lawbreakers while turning their backs on the honest citizens that they're sworn to protect. You know, what strikes me is the silence from one party up here on Capitol Hill. There's no demand for real enforcement. Instead, we're drowned in a chorus of tired slogans and distractions like tattoo motives, you know, chanted as like it could offset illegality. Well, it can't. Amnesty for all, no risk, no consequences. That seems to be the agenda. You know, at the same time, a lot of folks rail against empowering state and local police to aid federal efforts, you know, twisting logic into knots. These are the same officers that we trust to hunt murderers, rapists, traffickers. But if you inject immigration status into it, suddenly they're unfit. Their competence and integrity are repeatedly questioned, again, unless they are defying federal law outright. Then, of course, in sanctuary jurisdictions, everything they do is cheered or enabled. And that brings us to the deceptive term as well, sanctuary jurisdictions. It sounds noble, doesn't it? A haven, a refuge. But for whom? Not our sons and daughters, though left vulnerable due to them. Our communities are then torn apart. These sanctuaries shield the lawless, not the lawful, and that betrayal cuts to the core of what America must stand against. The American people spoke loud and clear in November. It's time for Congress to wake up, shift into the President Trump's gear, and act decisively. End sanctuary cities for good and launch mass deportations now. Every day we delay, we roll the dice on the next preventable tragedy, the next innocent life lost to a criminal alien that we could have deported. And lastly, just consider the numbers that are pretty much hot off the press. From October 1st, 2022 to February 6, 2025, more than 25,000 detainers were declined by sanctuary jails, more than 1,400 instances. The jails failed to give adequate notification to ICE to take custody of the aliens. You see it at more than half of the declined detainers were prisons in California, just where we saw a heinous crime where the child's body was found 10 minutes from where I grew up. When's enough enough? Congress needs to act. Give ICE the resources to act in accordance with the law, deliver on an electoral mandate, secure American communities, and then it's time for statutory changes to make sure these changes last and our system gets ramped up in terms of integrity. I yield back.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll now proceed with questions under the 5-minute rule, and we'll begin with Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for being here today. I've read all of your statements that you've submitted and been listening intently to your testimony. Mr. Hallman, I just want to confirm Cook County Jail in Illinois from October 1st, 2022 to February 6, 2025, released more than 1,000 criminal aliens into their community.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yep.
And just want to confirm this, Mr. Franklin. I don't want to take this out of context. You said compelling local police to enforce federal immigration law would only further damage community trust. Is that an accurate reflection? I'm reading from your statement. Is that accurate?
Yes, depending upon the jurisdiction and what those unique circumstances might be for that particular city or town.
And Ms. Carter-Walters, in Chicago, where they've released over a 3-year period more than 1,000 criminals back into your community, does that make you feel safer as a citizen?
No,
Did it make your community feel safer?
no,
And did it provide actual safety when you saw MS-13 trained at Aragua roaming the streets there?
no,
So you've demanded a full forensic audit of every dollar tied to migrant shelters, right?
yes,
And a freeze on the $92 million budget until full reviews are completed?
yes, sir,
And you want the accountability and community input?
yes, sir,
And a federal investigation into potential corruption? And potentially, if there is corruption, you want prosecution, is that right?
yes,
And most importantly, you want an end to sanctuary policies that you feel disadvantages you guys as citizens of Chicago vis-a-vis illegal aliens who are being released into your community.
we want to end sanctuary cities.
And go to you now, Sheriff. Thank you, Sheriff Wagner. So you outline and give some examples of some horrific instances in your own county, particularly shocking case 2021 in Othello. Can you briefly recount that for us?
Yeah, in 2021, we had an incident of an illegal alien that took the life of a mother and a daughter, the daughter being a special needs female that had the capacity of a five-year-old, and they did it in a very horrific way by dismembering the bodies and leaving them in a trunk of a vehicle.
How did that impact your community?
That was a huge impact in our community.
How so?
Well, any horrific crime, no matter who's involved, is going to impact the community. And I think that the situation that we were faced with is the limited resources that everyone keeps talking about here. I'm a department of 18 people, and that includes myself and my undersheriff that we're working. I'm not a politician. By, I guess, my job I am, but we actually get out and do the work. And this situation...
You imply that we don't get out and do the work, which is that's fair. That's fair, Sheriff.
I'm not saying
that's
that.
Fair.
I'm not saying that. But the reality is that, I mean, it affects the community because we are a small community, a small farming community of all nationalities, and we are very close to each other, and we care about each other very much.
In your recommendations, you talk about allowing you to enforce the law, and that might mean that you actually cooperate with federal officials. So, if I understand your keep Washington working law, that's the statute there. Are you allowed to hold someone with an ICE detainer?
We are not.
Are you allowed to transfer someone if ICE requests that you transfer them to their custody?
We're according to the KWW, no.
So the state law actually directly, not indirectly, not impliedly, it actually directly defies federal law, federal statute.
That's what I understand, yes.
Yeah, because federal statute says if you get a detainer, you're supposed to hold.
Yeah.
You're supposed to hold. That's what federal law says, and you can't do that there.
Correct.
How does that impact the safety of your community?
Well, ours is impacted in a great way because, one, my jail has been closed for 3 years, and I find that ironic in this situation as well. But it impacts us in a great way because, like I believe it was Mr. Jordan was explaining, putting people out onto the street and having them get caught again becomes a bigger problem. we're not arresting on immigration status. We're putting people in jail for crimes they committed in our community. And then ICE, because of public records that are available and things like that, they have the ability to find out who's in our custody and where they are and when they're released and all those kind of things. And they are basically released to their custody in the opposite way, similar to Denver in most cases.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired.
Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said in my opening, there are a lot of reasons why states and localities have adopted policies to leave immigration enforcement to federal government where it belongs. For some, it's about fostering trust with local communities. When immigrant communities know that calling 911 won't result in deportation for themselves or a family member, they are actually more willing to report and help law enforcement solve crimes, which makes all of us safer. For others, it's an important factor is legal liability. Courts all over the country, just to counter what my good colleague from Arizona said, have ruled that when local law enforcement complies with civil immigration detainer requests, and to be clear, an immigration detainer is a request, and continues to detain someone pursuant to a detainer when they otherwise would have been released, it's actually an unlawful detention, and it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So Sheriff Wagner, I want to thank you again for being here and for the work that you do to support your community, and I believe you when you say you want to keep all of your residents in Adams County safe. You can just give me simple yes or no's to this. At any time since 2019, has the Adams County Sheriff's Office given the federal government personal information of any Adams County residents, like fingerprints, dates of birth, home addresses, or driver's license numbers? Just turn your mic on, Sheriff. Thank you.
We do a program called Stone Garden.
So just a yes or no is fine. Do you give, it's a simple question, do you give the federal government personal information of Adams County residents like fingerprints, dates of birth, home addresses, and driver's license numbers?
I'm not aware of fingerprints, but I do believe we give public information to those people.
And how often has your office done that?
It depends on what you're talking about. You want yes and no answers, or do you want me to explain?
Well, in this one, I'm asking you if you have numbers for that.
Okay.
If you can give me
I don't have numbers, but we do a Stone Garden program through the Border Patrol, which is funded through the state as well.
Okay. And at any time since 2019, has the Adams County Sheriff's Office held people beyond their release date in order to facilitate their pickup by civil immigration enforcement officers?
Not that I'm aware of.
So you're following the Keep Washington Working Act in that way, and that's good to hear. I want to go on to some questions for Major Franklin. Let me turn to you. One of the studies that I submitted found that mandatory information sharing between local police and ICE led to a 16% increase in crime against Hispanics. And let me be clear, that 16% increase means 1.3 million more crimes. Can you help us understand this statistic and why jurisdictions with community trust policies in place experience less crime and why their residents feel safer?
Yes. So to be effective, and a good part of my career was in criminal investigation for quite a few years. And we first need to get people to report crimes before we can even begin to investigate them. And when there's no trust between the police and the community, many people will not even report crimes. And this hasn't just become evident with the immigrant community. I grew up in West Baltimore, and I experienced times in my neighborhood where we really had trust issues. Many of my friends, many people that I knew would not even report the crime of a robbery, of being a victim of a crime. And then we need witnesses. Once we begin to investigate a crime, we need witnesses. So you have to have that trust that we, the police, are going to do the right thing. And in the immigrant community, if they believe, just believe that their immigration status is going to be questioned, or maybe that of another family member, or that of a community member which they are friends with, they're not going to cooperate with us. We've seen this time and time again, but when you can establish that trust, you see, we cannot be effective in solving crimes And most of the people who commit the violence is a very small number.
Right.
If we can get them, if we can focus on them, get them convicted, charged convicted, then we have a great chance of reducing crime.
I just have a few seconds left here, but jurisdictions that adopted sanctuary policies experienced a 52 to 62% reduction in the domestic homicide rate for Hispanic women. Does that track with your experience as a law enforcement officer in jurisdictions with those policies?
Yes, as creating the first domestic violence unit in the Maryland State Police, as being the president of Turnaround Incorporated, which was about domestic violence in Baltimore City, shelter services and counseling services, yes, those numbers are very familiar to me. And there's a great report out, I believe it's...
Time's expired.
Well, usually the witness can finish answering.
Mr. Tiffany.
Thank you, Mr.
He did
Chair.
answer. The answer was yes. It was a yes or no question, and he added quite a bit more. Mr.
Strong
Tiffany.
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major Franklin, there's an organization or a publication, safehome.org. They listed Baltimore as the deadliest large city. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that report.
Yeah, they just last year, was in 2024, it just surpassed Memphis and Detroit. Mr. Holman, when a detainer has been issued, isn't that as a result of someone committing a crime?
ICE is reaching out to them to get them in custody, and they're on the radar likely because a crime was committed. That's why they're in that local jail.
So federal money flows to jurisdictions around the United States at taxpayers' expense to try to fight crime. Should taxpayers continue to fund sanctuary jurisdictions?
No, not at all. If you are in defiance of federal law and you're not working with federal law enforcement, you shouldn't receive a darn dime. Again, there's a lot of cooperative jurisdictions out there under President Trump. The 287G agreements that we're seeing, kind of the opposite of a sanctuary jurisdiction, has skyrocketed since President Trump took office. Those jurisdictions should be rewarded and helped for acting in accordance with federal law.
Should federal facilities be moved out of jurisdictions that are sanctuary cities?
If you're talking detention facilities or something like that, a lot of them...
Let me give you an example, and I'm going to ask Mr. Chairman to introduce this letter I sent to Doge with ask unanimous consent to enter that letter. But anyhow, I sent a letter. The SBA is moving facilities out of Boston, which is a sanctuary city, and I sent a letter to Doge saying, would you look into Dane County, Wisconsin, which is Madison? Would you look into moving facilities out of there if they're going to continue to be a sanctuary county? Do you think that's appropriate?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sheriff, so I mentioned Dane County, Wisconsin, and there was a situation where a gang member from Venezuela, Tren de Aragua, gang member, he was charged with false imprisonment and battery in Dane County last year, went on to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, which is about 100 miles from Madison to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, over on the Mississippi River. And this gang member was charged with domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and strangulation by the Prairie du Chien Police Department. Does it surprise you that another community is affected when there is a sanctuary community that is not honoring ICE detainers?
No.
Does it make it more dangerous for people throughout the region, not just, let's use this example of Dane County, Wisconsin, does it make it more dangerous for people throughout a region as a result of having these sanctuary policies?
I think, like the gentleman over here said earlier, I think every situation is different, every location is different, every circumstance is different. But I do think the policies matter, and the policies that we're faced with in sanctuary policy is it's too hampering for the situation that we're dealing with on the ground.
Ms. Carter Walters, so you know that Wisconsin is just north of you in Chicago, and I just cited Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin is 100 miles from Madison, Wisconsin, and Kenosha, Wisconsin is only 64 miles north of Chicago. Should people in Wisconsin be concerned about the sanctuary policies that are in Chicago?
Exactly, because they don't just stay in Chicago. They're in Indiana. They're all in the suburbs. So yes, they definitely should be afraid.
Why in the world do civic leaders like Mayor Johnson want to advance policies like this that not only make their own city less safe, but the entire region less safe?
Because we believe that that's how they're funneling money and stealing our tax dollars. So that's why we are demanding a forensic audit on how a breakdown of how those funds were allocated, because we have yet received anything of a breakdown to show how our tax dollars were spent. So yes, we believe that's how they're funneling the money, and that's why we're asking for a forensic audit, and we want arrests being made.
Mr. Chairman, I think these witnesses make the case so well that it is not just the sanctuary community that is being affected by these policies that they are implementing. It's an entire region. Most of the people of Wisconsin are affected as a result of what's going on in Dane County, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois. It is time for this to stop, and there needs to be consequences for what is going on with these sanctuary communities. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major Franklin, you're famous in Maryland. Your career in law enforcement has involved fighting violent gangs, drug traffickers, illegal gun trafficking from other states that have weaker laws than Maryland. But you've also studied law enforcement and worked on it, not just at the micro level, but at the macro level. I wonder if you could explain how this works. My colleagues are talking about horrific, gruesome cases of undocumented people who engage in murder or rape, serious crimes like that. If someone is engaged in a crime like that and they have a warrant for the person's arrest and they bring it to a local or state official who's got control over their custody, if they're in their custody for another reason, doesn't the local government have to cooperate with that warrant and turn that person over immediately to the federal authorities?
Yes. On a warrant, yes, we do. I don't know one case where we have not done so with a warrant.
Yeah, I was searching. I couldn't find a single case where there was any local government that did not cooperate with a warrant that was to demand turning over the body of a person who'd engaged in a serious crime. In fact, I saw an article about President Trump, who has been touting his ICE arrests. Half of them were people who were in local custody, and he asked for them to be turned over. They were being held for serious crimes or other kinds of crimes, and then they were deported, and he got them, based on a warrant. So if we're not talking about a warrant situation, right, then I come back to my puzzlement about why my colleagues who control the U.S. Congress right now are not engaged in trying to come up with a comprehensive immigration reform package. I mean, I'll give you an example. At the end of the last Congress, we had a bipartisan deal on toughening up the border with more officers, more patrols, more asylum judges, lots of new technology. The most conservative members of the U.S. Senate on the Republican side were championing it, advancing it. It had bipartisan support in the Senate. And then Donald Trump tanked it, basically saying for political reasons he didn't want it. He did not want a comprehensive immigration border solution. He wanted a problem to run against. And I see a lot of that in today's discussion. It's amazing to me that rather than engage in the hard work, maybe not even so hard anymore, of coming up with a bipartisan immigration solution, we would rather be beating up on local governments for not doing the job of the federal government. Now, but let's say that someone thought, okay, well, we really should commandeer the resources, the personnel, the machinery of the local governments, even though it's against the Constitution and against the 10th Amendment. But let's say they think that, and they want to use law enforcement not to turn over murderers and rapists and so on, but for routine immigration enforcement. All right, how would that work if, say, they came to, a particular city or county and say the vast majority of the undocumented people here we know are working in hotels or agriculture on farms or the construction sector. Could a city have the resources to say, we're going to send in raids of police on construction sites, on farms, in hotels to arrest all of these people that we think are here illegally?
We don't have the resources for that. We don't have the people for that. We're struggling to find people, to hire people, and we just don't have the resources. We have calls waiting. We're call hopping, one day after next.
The federal government's got a lot of money. We spend millions and millions of dollars just flying Donald Trump down to Florida to Mar-a-Lago to go play golf while he's crashing the stock market. Why doesn't the federal government spend that money? A locality might say. The cities are pretty hard up for money, right? They don't want to be invading all of the hotels and construction sites to go and look for undocumented workers. Do you think that's a fair request to put on the localities?
No, it's not.
It seems to me that the problem here is we have people not doing their jobs in Washington, and they want to blame local governments and put the pressure on them. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Chairman Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, are you familiar with the Department of Homeland Security Immigration Detainer Notice of Action form? You familiar with these forms?
I've heard of them, yes.
Yeah, okay. And these forms, about halfway down the page, it says, it is therefore requested that you, this is going to local law enforcement, requested that you notify DHS as early as practicable, at least 48 hours if possible, before the alien in your custody is released. All right? Is that partisan or is that just common sense?
It depends on who you ask, but it is common sense.
The ranking member said we need to function in a bipartisan way. I don't think that's partisan. That's just saying, hey, you got a bad guy, at least someone who's been charged with crime in your possession. He's also an illegal migrant. Can you give us a 48 hours heads up before you release him to the streets?
Sure.
That makes sense to me, right? I don't think that's partisan. I think that's just common sense. Mr. Hallman, are you familiar how this form works? This detainer process is supposed to work? All right, the next line says, maintain custody of the alien for a period not to exceed 48 hours beyond the time. Again, we're requesting you do. They're not demanding. We're just requesting you help us out. Law enforcement working with other law enforcement to protect the safety of law enforcement and, of course, the public at large beyond the time when he or she would otherwise have been released from your custody to allow DHS to assume custody. Again, that seems like common sense to me. But sanctuary policies prevent these two requests from taking place. Is that right? If you're a sanctuary state, sanctuary city, you don't comply with these. You may give them we're going to give you a 10-minute notice. We're going to release them and then tell you we already released them. That's how it works in these sanctuary cities, in these sanctuary states. Is that right, Mr. Hammond?
That's correct, too. It's even interesting, too, under the Biden administration, you have a lot of state and local law enforcement who think that they're not going to comply with ICE based on their experiences under the Biden administration. ICE had policies in place that made it so hard for enforcement and removal officers to actually work with these jails.
Yeah.
They made it next to impossible. So you have all of these jails that think, oh, I don't know if I'm going to comply. I may get penalized if a state puts an aggressive restriction on that. But everything is going to be streamlined. They want to comply. It will be a good process.
Yeah, let's put up on the screen. Are you familiar with the name Abraham Gonzalez, Mr. Hallman? Do you know this guy? Abraham Gonzalez?
I do not.
Okay, this guy was released this year, February 28, 25. He was released. Look at what the sheriff's department put here. This is a ICE notification. They put the stamp on there, being released to the streets. Now, this guy had been in custody for 345 days. And ICE had sent this very form asking, hey, can you give us a 48-hour heads up before this guy who was charged with aggravated assault, charged with stealing an automobile, charged with menacing, can you just give us a heads up? And guess what Sanctuary City, Denver did? They called him 1 hour before, and ICE couldn't get there, and they released this guy to the streets as they stamped on the form. Now, what I find interesting, can we put that back up again? What I find interesting is under the section flag, see it over there on the right-hand side? It says he's cleared, but then look what it says, violent to staff. So the very people who released him to the streets knew this guy. He'd been charged again with aggravated assault, stealing a car, but he'd also been violent to the very people in the jail who were holding him, and they still wouldn't give notice to ICE. And then, as I said in my opening statement, this guy is released to the streets. ICE goes out to arrest him. Officer gets hurt. They had to tase the guy so the migrant gets hurt. Tell me how that is not Tell me why that we should have that kind of policy happen, Mr. Hallman.
Well, we shouldn't. It doesn't keep our communities safer in any sense. And again, what they're trying to do here is they say, hey, at least we tried, an hour heads up or whatever. But how can they look at that man to release him on the streets, knowing the crimes that have been committed, knowing that risk? How can they say, hey, we'll see you later, as he goes off and could potentially commit another crime down the line? I mean, is it worth it to instill trust with the immigrant community? How about, the citizens, and how about the harm that they could face due to the unknown of releasing a dangerous criminal alien to the streets?
They knew this guy had a propensity to be violent to law enforcement because he had done it in their very jail, and they can't give federal law enforcement a heads up. Sheriff Wagner, would you have given him a heads up?
I think in that circumstance I would.
Yeah, you certainly would, but for people who do what you would do, you're now getting sued for that, right? Your attorney general is coming after you.
Yeah, and as the gentleman over here said, we should stay out of local business, right? And so here I am with the state attorney coming down on me for trying to juggle the whole mess.
Because that's how law enforcement, you're supposed to work with other law enforcement when you can, not violate the Constitution, just be in good common sense way to make sure people are safe, law enforcement safe, public is safe, and frankly, as I said before, even the migrant is safer when you do it that way, when you do it the common sense way versus the sanctuary city way. And that's what we really have to, I think, that's really the decision here. Common sense or sanctuary city way. I think common sense wins out every time. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Nadler.
Mr. Chairman, the Trump administration, after pardoning hundreds of violent criminals, has launched a reckless, chaotic, and inhumane immigration policy that is making our communities less safe. The administration, and as we heard today, the chairman of this committee, speak as if all immigrants are criminals. The administration is draining resources away from other important law enforcement priorities and is even targeting legal immigrants and vulnerable populations. It's no surprise that many states and localities do not want to aid and abet the president's extreme anti-immigrant agenda. Recognizing that good policing depends on building trust with their residents, many cities forbid their law enforcement officers from questioning victims of crime or witnesses to a crime about their immigration status, and they do not share immigration information with federal authorities. They believe that their communities are at greater risk when a victim of domestic violence is afraid to ask the police for protection from her abuser for fear of deportation, or when witnesses to a murder refuse to assist law enforcement in tracking down the perpetrator because they're afraid their immigration status will be discovered. These cities have concluded that if they take on the federal responsibility to enforce immigration laws, it would destroy trust between immigrants and local law enforcement, which would make everyone less safe. Major Franklin, why is building trust with all members of the community so important to policing?
I think you touched on something, sir, regarding the importance of, it's not just for keeping members of the immigrant community safe, because there's a very small number of violent offenders also prey on people outside of that community as well. So as soon as we can get the reporting of the crime, the cooperation from witnesses to have that person arrested, charged, convicted, and get them off the streets and hold them responsible, the better for not just the immigrant community, but the entire community.
Is it fair to say then that if minority communities, immigrants, or really any part of your community feels unsafe going to the police, that it makes everyone in the jurisdiction less safe? And can you explain
Absolutely.
why?
Again, because the importance of that trust, and this isn't something new, by the way. We've experienced the same thing with underserved communities where there's no trust with the police, and we fail to get an accuracy regarding the crimes because they're not reported. There's no trust in reporting the crime because they don't believe the police are going to do the right things, and in many cases, they believe the police may cause them some sort of harm. In the immigrant community, it's about being deported, and not just the victim or the witness being deported, but that victim or witness can be friends or relative of someone else who might be undocumented, and they fear that deportation, so there's going to be limited, if any communication, any cooperation at all with the authorities. And it's not just about communicating with the police, it's about fearing interacting with other positions of authority and services within the city who they believe they may have some sort of relationship with law enforcement. They want to ensure that them and their friends and families are not subjected to deportation.
Thank you. One of the priority Republican bills this Congress, H.R. 32, the so-called No Bailout for Sanctuary Cities Act, which has been teed up for floor consideration in the coming weeks, would gut billions in federal funding for states and localities, including funding for essential programs like public safety, education, and transportation, if states and localities are not able to aid the Trump administration in federal immigration enforcement. Would cutting federal funding from local and state police departments help or hurt public safety?
It would make public safety much worse.
Can you talk about the real-world impact that these cuts would have on the ability of law enforcement to protect their communities?
Absolutely. When I was in charge of Baltimore City Human Resources, we had a special unit that applied for federal grants because we need the funding, we need the resources, not just for law enforcement activities and duties, but for other important things like youth programs, which are extremely important, other services, mental health services. There are many types of critical services that our communities need.
Okay, thank you. As we've heard today, my Republican colleagues talk as if all immigrants are criminals. Could you tell us whether that's true and whether, in fact, the studies show that the crime rate among immigrants is lower than the crime rate among native-born American citizens?
Studies show that among the immigrant community, it's lower.
So most immigrants are not criminals?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I yield back.
Time has expired. Sheriff Nails.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the panel for being here. Thank you, Sheriff Wagner, those distinguished gentlemen behind you. I want to thank you all for your service. I'll give you a round of applause. Thank you for our county sheriffs. We need them. We need them. They're supported. You know, most of the crime, and I know Mr. Franklin or Major Franklin, you were talking about the distrust between the police and the communities they serve. Let's be honest with each other. You know where the distrust begins, right? It all starts in these large cities across America. I bet you if you ask one of those sheriffs, we had everyone come up here, they don't have a problem with trust between their agents or their deputies and the people they serve. It takes place in these large cities, the San Franciscos, the Chicagos. When you look at Chicago, and Ms. Walters talking about Chicago, you had Lori Lightweight there. I mean, her approval rating was in the toilet. What, a 22% approval rating? I think she was the first incumbent to lose re-elect. And why is it? Her policies. It was the sanctuary city policies. She was horrible, absolutely horrible. All the anti-police rhetoric. Would you agree with me that that's why Lori Lightweight is no longer the mayor in Chicago?
Yes, and that's why Brandon Johnson has a 6% approval rating.
You should consider running for mayor. I think you're great. Anyway, Sheriff Wagner, you know, I was the sheriff, Fort Bend County, large county. Everybody that got arrested into my jail, I had about 1,800 beds. When you got arrested, every morning, every name, mine, any name, didn't matter who it was, would get sent to ICE. We'd send it to ICE in Houston. They would scrub that list, and they would then determine who a detainer gets placed on. I complied with every single detainer. Didn't matter if they said a detainer needs to be placed on this guy, and we kept our people safe. That's why I was a very popular sheriff and never had to worry about a re-election, because the people supported what we did. But then when you got some of these liberal states, your state for a good example, Illinois and others, we created a law now in the state of Texas. We had a crazy rogue sheriff in Austin, go figure, in Austin, Travis County, that wasn't complying with these detainers. So we now have a law in Texas that says if you don't comply, a county sheriff does not comply with ICE detainers, you'll be charged with a crime and then you'll be removed from office. And most sheriffs across the great state of Texas support that. I believe you would as well.
Yeah, I would.
Because it just keeps our people, safe. I want to thank you again, too, in 2005. You know, I read your bio, you were awarded a Medal of Valor for one of your deputies that was shot by an illegal multiple times, I believe.
That is correct.
Yeah, so thank you for your service. You guys are fantastic. You know, you're being sued by your attorney general. I guess you're putting your community at risk. Did you know that?
If I can answer some of that, I know there's a lot going on, but the reality is this. You talked about the size of your agency and your jail. I have a 28-bed facility that's been closed for 3 years. We are not detaining on immigration status. We do share information through the Stone Garden thing that we are a part of, and several other counties across our state are doing, and the state actually gives us the money through it. They're the ones that take their cut and then give us the money. But yes, it is exactly what you're saying.
Some of the actions in a few of the sanctuary jurisdictions, I want you to ask you if you think they're conducive to public safety. In King County, Seattle, illegal alien named Julio Cruz Velasquez, custody in 2019 with priors for rape, domestic violence, burglary, robbery, DUI, drug possession dating back to 2010. King County ignored the ICE detainers, released him into the community. He was then arrested later on for murder. It would have never happened if you'd have just complied with ICE. Does that sound conducive to public safety? No. It doesn't, of course not. The stories go on. Washington County, also in your state, illegal alien Alejandro Melandio Hernandez was arrested for manslaughter and a second degree for killing somebody while driving recklessly. The county ignored an ICE detainer, released him into the community, and he is still at large today. Does that sound conducive to public safety, Sheriff?
No.
Of course it doesn't. Let's go to Boston. April this year, Boston released an illegal alien charged with aggravated child rape rather than comply with an ICE detainer. Does that sound like conducive to public safety?
No.
Of course it doesn't, and the story goes on and on and on. Mr. Franco, we go to Baltimore. April 24, Raul Calderon, a 25-year-old Guatemalan national convicted of fourth-degree sex offense and second-degree assault. Despite ICE detainer's request, Baltimore County released him after suspending his prison sentence. Then in 2024, another individual, 25 years old, convicted of molesting 2 family members, 9 and 10 years old. It just goes on and on and on. Now, Baltimore has problems. You got a lot of corruption in Baltimore. Again, when you look at these major cities, Baltimore, Chicago, everywhere, they're run by far-left liberal Democrats and by Soros-funded DAs. And that's why you're getting clobbered in elections. The American people are sick and tired of it, and they're fighting back. Ms. Walters, I salute you. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Jayapal, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. This hearing is extremely timely. The Trump administration's recent actions against our refugee community are making people less safe, not more safe. Recently, the administration sent emails to Ukrainians escaping Putin's war of aggression, telling them, do not attempt to remain in the United States. The federal government will find you. Then a day later, they said, sorry, we made a mistake. Cutting off resettlement funds for Afghans who made it to the United States after fighting side by side with American troops. That's in this administration's agenda. Turning their backs on courageous Afghans who worked directly with our forces and are desperate to reach our shores, but have to hide out from the Taliban because we're not accepting refugees anymore. Revoking all U.S. visas held by South Sudanese passport holders because their government refused to accept a deportee that the Sudanese government said was Congolese, not South Sudanese. And then this administration claims to care deeply about persecuted Christians while slashing Christian refugee entry by 78% in the first term and doing even less to help Christians who are persecuted enter the United States today. All of these heartless and short-sighted actions by the Trump administration serve no discernible purpose besides bullying those who escaped war, authoritarianism, and disaster. Again, this bullying undermines the stature of the United States in the eyes of the world and makes all of us less safe. It diverts our law enforcement resources away from real threats in order to upend the lives of honest, hardworking people in need of refuge from the United States. Now, with that said, I want to turn to the issue of how intentionally eroding trust of immigrant communities by local law enforcement can impact public safety. Major Franklin, just a couple questions for you. Can you speak to how efforts by this administration to destroy relationships between the immigrant community and local police officers would be detrimental to public safety?
Sure. It would be detrimental in a number of ways. Number one, I spoke earlier to being successful in identifying victims of crime, having crime reported, being successful during the investigation of those crimes so that we can hold those violent offenders accountable. But also it would be detrimental in the loss of critical resources that we desperately need among our law enforcement agencies around the country. And again, I want to speak to the uniqueness of every jurisdiction. We should have the ability to develop our own strategies that would work within those particular communities that have their own special needs. A loss of critical resources would devastate us in the law enforcement community in a number of ways. So I took an oath, not just to the Constitution, but to the people that I serve, to protect everyone who's in my community, no matter what their status is. And in order for me to do that, and my comrades to do that, you've got to have trust. You've got to build trust if you're going to get the information you need so that people aren't fearful in coming forward to report. They don't want to be victimized. They don't want their friends and family victimized. They want people held accountable, and they want to be able to come forward and trust us and not fear them or their friends being deported from the United States.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the U visa, a visa for victims of crimes who cooperate with law enforcement or governmental officials in the investigation or prosecution of criminal activities? And if so, do you think that they're helpful?
Yes, I am familiar with it, and they are helpful. Of course, the police officer has to take the initiative in filling out the paperwork when we're dealing with the victim to make sure that they're able to stay in the community and in the country.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Chairman. Let's cut through all the noise, all the blur, all the politics, all the nonsense. Nobody on this side of the aisle, because it was repeated again over there before, ever said that immigrants are bad people. We love legal immigrants that come here the right way. They are great Americans. I'll tell you a story real quick. I was picked up in a taxi cab the other day in Washington, D.C. Young gentleman driving the taxi cab. I love to talk to people, start talking to him. He's from Ethiopia. He came here legally. He always wanted to be an architect. His cousin was an architect, and he admired him so much, and his cousin had helped him. But in Ethiopia, they tell you what you're going to be. You don't have that choice like you do in America. So he was told he wasn't going to be an architect. He legally immigrated here, worked his butt off, gave it everything he had, worked multiple jobs, got his degree, and was working still more because now he was getting his master's degree. He taught me. He said to me, for God's sake, protect your country. All these illegal immigrants coming here are not good. Legal immigrants are angrier about the illegal ones than anybody else. They did things the right way. They did it by the book. They're good people. We love them. So let's be clear. Cut the nonsense. And I'm not directing that to you. And let's also cut the nonsense because it costs money. There's only so much money in this world, and we're going through a lot of budgetary stuff right now. And I make it clear, I'm fighting for Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. Many of us are on both sides of the aisle. But when you're spending money on this stuff, it's less money for our children. It's less money for our seniors. It's less money for our veterans. It's less money for our disabled because we don't have an endless amount. So when you're spending tax dollars on that, our American people in our cities and in our rural areas and everywhere in between are getting hurt. Let's cut through the nonsense. We're taking things away from them, and it's wrong. You can't have a country without borders. You can't have public safety without law enforcement. You can't have public safety when you're releasing lawbreakers into the community. And not all illegals have committed horrendous crimes, but some have, and we're not checking on it properly. There have been murders. There have been rapes. There have been disfigurements. There has been all kinds of harm done. And when you create a sanctuary city or state, you are compounding that. And you know what? The only thing worse than the illegal people when they come here, especially those that are violent, are the people that condone that and give them benefits and help them to stay here. How wrong is that? They're hurting everybody else who voted for them. I'll give you one example. My home state, the state of New Jersey. Nationwide ICE is currently detaining nearly 48,000 illegals. It's exceeding its funding capacity, which, as you all know, is 41,500 beds. So, in the Northeast, particularly in New Jersey, we face a severe shortage of beds. So what did ICE do? They took action. In New Jersey, they plan to open a 1,000-bed facility in Newark, in Delaney Hall, to relieve the pressure. And guess what? Newark's mayor fought it. He sided with the people who were illegal, the people who were breaking the law. He doesn't want to help in law enforcement. And by that, then you're breaking the law as an elected official. The elected official is a lawbreaker, and it's wrong. We know what happened to Lake and Raleigh. We know what's happened to so many people. We're trying to clean up the chaos that was left behind. Bottom line, I have a couple questions here. So I want to, Sheriff Wagner, you face legal threats for doing what you're doing. Could you tell us a little bit about that real quickly?
Yeah, right now we're being faced with a lawsuit from the Attorney General of Washington State on, in my view, some...
They're suing you for trying to uphold the law. What a crazy world we live in. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but how awful that is.
That's okay.
No, because it pisses me off.
Yeah, I get it. It pisses me off. But the reality is that it's some of the circumstances that have been, it's very political. It's politically driven, and it's unfortunate that we're in that position because we, like I said before, we've had a jail that's been closed for 3 years. I'm not housing people. I use outside entities to do that. I don't have the resources and manpower to go out and round people up out in the fields. Not only that, the other mentioned person that was here earlier, look, we're a small community, and I do have the trust of my community. I have a 2/3 Hispanic population in my workforce at the sheriff's office. I have guys that less than 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that were illegal, got their citizenship, and they work for me. So I understand the process, and I understand how these people are affected. The whole fear-mongering is coming from both sides, quite frankly, but it does come, and it tries to hit our community because we are a Hispanic population of 34%.
And there's the truth.
That's the truth. And we unfortunately are dealing with a nationwide problem where the border is the southern border, not the northern yet. And my community is affected because guess what? We fit the mold that needs to be in politics apparently right now.
Thank you for what you do. I yield back.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a UC request. This one is from Newsweek. Donald Trump pardon recipients are being charged with new crimes since their pardons. And this is NPR, January 30th, 2025. January 6 rioters pardoned by Trump had criminal records.
Without objection. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chairman McClintock. Another day and another hearing to distract the country from the dumpster fire of the Trump administration instead of talking about how Trump and Musk are destroying our economy, busting unions, gutting Social Security and Medicaid, stealing people's private information and trampling on civil liberties. Republicans are here to, surprise, surprise, scapegoat immigrants once again. The Republican playbook on immigration is dishonest and cruel. Republicans have lifted up some tragedies that involved immigrants committing a few crimes. This is the exception, not the rule. I live in an immigrant neighborhood in Chicago. I know what it's like. But the antidote to dishonesty is truth, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The truth here is that there's significant evidence that welcoming jurisdictions have lower crime rates, lower poverty rates, lower reliance on public assistance, and lower unemployment rates. This is from a stakeholder, someone who lives day in, day out. Do I want to live in a dangerous neighborhood? I have a wife, I have children, I have grandchildren. But welcoming jurisdictions have had to do this for good reason. And the truth is that the courts around the country have repeatedly upheld welcoming policies like the ones in Chicago, Cook County, and Illinois. They've also held that forcing states and localities to participate in immigration enforcement violates the Constitution. The truth is that welcoming policies increase trust between community and law enforcement. That's why forcing states and localities to be an instrument of ICE is opposed, not only by local law enforcement leaders, including Chicago, but also by many crime victims groups like the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. But despite all of this, Republicans are championing a bill that would cut billions of federal funding for essential programs like public safety, education, and transportation if states and localities do not sign up to enforce Stephen Miller and Tom Homan's reckless, racist, and illegal immigration agenda. Major Franklin, thank you for being here. Let me ask you, would cutting funding for these essential programs help or harm public safety in your opinion?
Cutting the funding for those programs would definitely harm. It's no doubt about it. And the services are extensive, and that's one of the things that the Law Enforcement Action Partnership helps communities do, cities and towns, is to manage their limited resources and find other ways of dealing with community issues and problems other than law enforcement.
Thank you. And in your experience, how do welcoming policies affect domestic violence survivors and other crime victims?
So outside of my law enforcement experience, when I was with the Baltimore Police Department, I was also the president of an organization called Turnaround Incorporated. That was an advocacy organization for victims of domestic violence and child sexual assault and so on. And working with that organization for 4 years opened my eyes quite a bit as to the importance of having welcoming policies for the immigrant community as it relates to domestic violence and ensuring that they get the services they need, especially since it is very difficult for them to come forward when they are victims or their family members are victims. So you've got to have that trust built between those communities and the police.
Thank you, sir. It's quite clear to me that Republicans are not interested in public safety or crime victims. Tragically, if Republicans cared about public safety, they'd talk about the obedience to the NRA and red states having the highest rates of gun deaths and homicides. If Republicans cared about public safety, they'd support investments in evidence-based public health approaches that are proven to reduce violence. If Republicans cared for public safety, they wouldn't be criminalizing immigrants, kidnapping people, or disappearing them to El Salvador. And if Republicans cared about public safety, they would never have supported Donald Trump, a man whose greed and cruel actions makes us all less safe. I'm proud to have helped shape Chicago's first welcoming measure in 1985 in the face of lies and cruelty. Mr. Chairman, before I yield back, I do request unanimous consent.
Without objection, the chair would remind members that the kind of personal attacks directed at the president are not permitted on the House floor, and they will not be permitted in this committee. Mr. Moore.
Can I submit, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I said without.
Thank you. I would like to submit for the record a study. Immigrants do not commit more crimes in the U.S. despite fear-mongering. Another article. Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than U.S.-born Americans, studies find. And a third article, study finds that no crime increase in cities that adopted sanctuary policies despite Trump claims. Thank you.
Be very interested in reading those. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the Biden-Harris administration, border crisis, illegal aliens flooded sanctuary cities, overwhelmed their infrastructure, and maxed out their budgets. According to the New York City Mayor Eric Adams, by the end of the fiscal year 2025, the city had spent more than $12 billion on illegal aliens for their city. A study also shows that for Denver, one study estimated that city had spent $356 million on illegal aliens. And Ms. Walters, according to the report,
the mayor of Chicago spent $638 million in vendor contracts for illegal aliens since 2023. Ms. Walters, have you seen your taxpayers' dollars being used to benefit illegal aliens instead of the American citizens?
Yes, and actually, after he spent all that money, he then came back and tried to propose a $300 million property tax on the American citizens. So not only did he take our tax dollars and spend it on people who, and let me just say this, when you come across that border illegally, you have broke the law, therefore making you a criminal. So the 20 million people who cross this border are criminals. So let's just get that, get that straight right now. That's why we trust President Trump, because he is listening to the American citizens. And the Democrat Party, that's why their rating is, 26%? Because they refuse to listen to what the American citizens want.
Ms. Walters, I think really, Ms. Walters, I think really you're right. And I think, so is that how you see Chicago flipping red? Is it the immigration issue? I know that was a big issue in this election, and I agree with you. If people come across the border illegal, they are lawbreakers by definition. And we're not a sanctuary city in Alabama, but I'll tell you this, I had a 14-year-old girl drug into a restroom in Wetumpka, Alabama, and raped by an individual who he had claimed to be a minor when he came to the U.S. He was 31 years old. And the Biden administration didn't bother to do a background check, turn him loose into our community. And we're not a sanctuary city. I cannot imagine what these sanctuary cities are having to deal with. And these law enforcement officers, when they're trying to just, for public safety purposes, catch people and then not even notify us because they just want to release them back into the community. So tell me, so you think this issue of just the very people who supported the Democratic Party are being left in the cold, in my humble opinion. And so is that how you're seeing Chicago flip red, because of the Democratic policies and what they're doing to those communities they're supposed to be protecting?
Yes. Chicago flips red established because of that. And we are going to make it our business because we have seen the destruction that the Democratic Party policies have done to our communities in our city. It's funny that Mr. Garcia is from Chicago and he cannot tell you what's happening in our community, because if he came into our community, he would see all the gang graffiti, the Trendy Agua signs, the MS-13. He would see that across the street in the park and where they're putting the shelters at, that all the needles that's in the park, all night. All we hear is music all night, and the drinking and the defecating on the streets, all the the illegal restaurants that are allowed to operate on the residential, on our corners.
So Ms. Walters, in some ways, you feel almost like a prisoner in your own community because of the policies of the administration prior to Trump.
Yes, and then they can't lock them up. My husband just retired. He's a police officer. They cannot lock them up, and they wasn't reporting the numbers. So if an illegal alien committed a crime, they wasn't reporting it, and then you didn't know.
So that's why they say, there's less crime by a lot of the illegals, because they're not bothering reporting the crimes that the illegals are actually committing in those communities.
Yes.
I got you. Hey, real quick question, and you can finish up on this. Democrats really, they attack Republicans often. They call us racist because of our opposition to sanctuary jurisdictions. What is your response to that when they say, we're here trying to make communities safe and they're calling us racist? What is your response to that sort of rhetoric?
Well, I say, call me a racist. And I don't want anybody who crossed over here illegally, unvetted, I don't want them in my community. So you call me racist because let me say, the Democratic Party is so far from reality. They go in their gated communities. I don't see any of those people that's advocating to keep these people here. I don't see them in their house and their communities. They don't have them around their children or their husbands, but yet and still they're advocating for us to allow this in our communities around our kids and our families.
Thank you, Ms. Walters. I got to yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time's expired. Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much. I just want to clarify that usually when we talk about racism in the Republican Party, it has to do with things like deleting the history of Jackie Robinson, deleting the history of Harriet Tubman, or deciding that the Tuskegee Airmen should be deleted, or maybe just defunding the African American Museum. The list kind of goes on and on and on, but I am not here to talk about why they are racist. I am here to talk about some other things as it relates to immigration. So let's get to that. You know, it's interesting because we got all these theories. I don't know why we put up with getting data and facts if we just gonna sit here and talk about how we feel. So, you know, maybe we can inject some facts into these feelings. I'm not really sure. But as somebody who has actually practiced criminal defense, I don't know if there's anybody else in here who has, I can tell you that I have handled thousands of cases, not hundreds of cases, thousands on the state level in Texas, Arkansas, and the federal level. And I can tell you that, you know what? If I had to look at the vast majority of the cases that I was representing criminal defendants on, the vast majority of them just didn't happen to be immigrants. These are just the facts of my experience, and maybe the immigrants went to somebody else. I don't know, but I can tell you in my actual experience in real life, in reality, and not in this fallacy world that y'all are making up where you hate on everybody. So my Republican colleagues are here using today to continue pushing this false narrative of sanctuary cities harboring criminals, yet right here in D.C. we have a 34-count felon being harbored in the White House. The hypocrisy coming from your side of the aisle over concerns regarding lawlessness is outrageous. Right now, House Republicans are conducting town halls with constituents lying about our legal system. That, quote, there is no due process if you come here illegally because you violated the law. That immigrants, quote, are not entitled to due process. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. We all want to live in a country where we respect the law. So I'm a bit surprised that Republicans aren't up in arms with Trump detaining and deporting U.S. citizens and people who are lawfully present here in the United States. What Trump and ICE are doing is a disgrace, and it's all being done without respect for our laws. For example, Mr. Neri Alvarado, a Dallas-based baker, was arrested and deported to El Salvador prison for having an autism awareness tattoo in honor of his 15-year-old autistic brother. This was done despite never having been to El Salvador, despite having no gang affiliation, and despite having no organized crime connection. He was deported because ICE agents have been detaining, quote, all Venezuelans with tattoos. And to be clear, this type of racial profiling isn't just a one-off. In fact, the ACLU, using DHS's own data, mind you, found that at least 65% of the states and local agencies voluntarily working with ICE have records of racial profiling and civil rights violations. Mr. Franklin, first of all, and Sheriff, let me thank you for your service too, because I appreciate law enforcement. I just want to put that out there. But Mr. Franklin, Major Franklin, you're a decorated law enforcement officer. Yes or no, in your experience, does racially profiling people make communities safer?
No.
And yes or no, does ICE forcing state or local law enforcement to detain people make communities safer?
No.
You know, it's interesting because we've already, and we're gonna, do Groundhog's Day a couple of times, seemingly here. Actually, let me give you the facts real quick before I go to that. In fact, a report for the American Immigration Council found that cities that didn't enforce ICE detainers have 35.5% lower crime rates, 2.3% lower poverty rates, and rely less on public assistance, including 4.9% less for children under 18. And I do want to be clear right now, ICE is trying to work with the IRS because we actually take in billions of dollars because of immigrants in this country, and now they're going to try to get them out. And I'm going to tell you that the biggest issue that we have, I really don't think this should be a partisan issue, so I'm going to agree with my Republican colleagues. I think that we all should want to be safe in our communities. The problem that we have is that we have an incompetent administration, that everything that they touch turns to shit. Because what they do is they take a wide sweeping brush and they have decided that the enemy is now going to be immigrants instead of taking a scalpel. That's all we're asking, is to be exact in what you're doing instead of taking a sledgehammer to everything. Thank you, and I will yield.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Democrats keep using the phrase constitutional crisis, but the real constitutional crisis is sanctuary city mayors, DAs, and judges who are defying federal law and preventing the president from doing the job that he was elected to do by the American people. It is the job of the federal government to keep Americans safe. When violent gangs are taking over American cities like Chicago, that is an invading army. When you can't live peacefully in an apartment in Colorado, that is also an invading army. No judge, DA, or liberal mayor should be able to usurp the power of our commander-in-chief, who was elected by 77 million Americans, and now the Supreme Court agrees. Since the Democrats do not like the result of the election, you would think that they will be focusing on the midterms coming up, but instead they are engaging in a judicial coup d'etat. The reason they are not focused on the midterms is because they are not confident that they can take back control of the House of Representatives in 2 years because they have no leader and they have no valid message. The Democrat Party has a 21% approval rating with voters in this country. And why? Because their only message is Trump is bad. They've gone so far as to attack people for driving electric vehicles. They openly admit that they are DEI hires, and they claim that the reason they're not popular with voters right now is because they are not opposing Trump enough. That's the reaction to their failure. Their solution is to become more extreme and more unpopular with their policies. This question must be asked: does the Democrat Party hate President Trump more than they love our country and more than they love the safety of my fellow Americans? This might explain why they are willing to overtly defend members of Trinidad MS-13 rather than stand up and clap for a child with a terminal brain cancer illness, or for a young man admitted to West Point, my alma mater, or for a family of the gentleman who was murdered in Butler, Pennsylvania. Trump derangement syndrome is real. It's a real thing. And sanctuary policies are harming my fellow Americans, as my witnesses have testified here today. This U.S. congressman is tired of seeing mothers, daughters, and wives of Americans raped, maimed, and murdered by Trinidad and MS-13 and other violent criminals that have snuck across the border to destroy this great nation. All of us should support ICE raids, the hard work of Tom Homan, Customs and Border Protection, and the policies of our duly elected Commander-in-Chief. Ms. Carter-Walters, thank you for being here, ma'am. I really appreciate your testimony earlier. In your experience, specifically in Chicago, are communities of colors disproportionately impacted by illegal migrants getting special privileges? And if so, how?
Yes, so they are placed in our communities. They are not placed anywhere else but in our communities. And they are taking over our schools. So whereas you already had overcrowded schooling, so you might have 20 to 1 class. Now you have 40 to 1 class, and then they don't speak English. So now that's taken away from the child already who is already in an overcrowded classroom. And then you have where now we can't even, they took over our parks. So where you'll have grandmoms and things, kids, to keep the kids off the street, they house illegals into the field houses. So they took over our field houses. And then now apartments, whereas because our mayor is paying so much money for illegals to house them, now we have tenants that can't even, the landlords that won't even rent to American citizens because they're renting to illegals because they get paid more for illegals.
Now, let me ask you the next question, ma'am. You've been black for a pretty long time, right?
Yes.
So me too. I mean, I've been black for my entire life, so just want to acknowledge that. So by basically what you're saying, do you view yourself as a different American, or do you just care about the safety of our community? Are you a racist for feeling this way?
No.
Thank you very much. And Sheriff Wagner, thank you so much for your service. I really appreciate all you've done for this great country. You've been a hostage negotiator, detective, a patrol sergeant, and sheriff. Your accolades are unbelievable. My question for you is this: what are the Democrats in your state doing to prevent you from doing your job? And do you expect more of this, or are you not allowed to enforce the law?
It's come down to I'm not allowed to or else. And that's really what we're faced with. We have an attorney general that is going by his marching orders, whatever you want to call it, and coming after our little agency to serve as a message to the rest of the state of Washington. And if you look behind me, that's why these sheriffs are here today. They all feel the heat. They feel the situation is bearing down on us. We're only 39 sheriffs in our state, and our state needs sheriffs, believe it or not. But they keep trying the attack constantly.
Thank you. And as somebody that has worn the uniform, I understand the importance of leadership, and it starts at the top. Thank you so much for what you've done for our great nation.
Has expired.
I have a unanimous consent request.
I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There was no time remaining. I have a unanimous consent request.
Go ahead.
To enter into the record an article about it's entitled, U.S. Citizen Sues Department of Homeland Security Following 3.5 Years in Immigration Detention.
Without objection.
I have another article entitled, Marine Veteran Was Among U.S. Citizens Detained by ICE, ACLU says.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one more UC request. This will be interesting to members. Just breaking news, Trump appointed federal judge, blocks all deportations from Southern District of Texas under Trump's Alien Enemies Act proclamation. You know, it was moved from D.C. to Texas.
Without objection.
And Mr. Chair, I have a UC request as well. This is actually laying out, this is setting the record straight on local involvement in federal civil immigration enforcement, the facts and the law. It lays out multiple settlements because of violations of people's constitutional rights.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're fiddling while Rome burns. Our country is in danger of losing the democracy that we valued for so many years. And we look forward to the 250th anniversary of our Constitution and our nation, when the Constitution that James Madison drafted is being torn apart by this administration. Powers that are given to the legislature, powers of the purse in Article 1 to Congress, are being surrendered to the executive. The ability to just eliminate offices that have been funded by Congress have been given to the executive. There are checks and balances in our Constitution, precious checks and balances that make us different from countries like authoritarian countries, where the ruler is like the king and does whatever he or she wants. And we're destroying those checks and balances. Congress is supposed to check the executive, and we're not doing it. They're taking our powers. They're destroying offices that were created by Congress, like the Department of Energy and the Department of Education, and the Peace Institute, which was set up as an independent group, not part of Congress, not part of the executive, and they've gone in doge with police officers from D.C. and taken it over, and they're trying to eliminate it. And there are all other kind of offices like that they're trying to eliminate. Our country is in danger right now. And immigration is important, but if we don't have a country, immigration isn't an issue. And I'm just astonished at how many people, particularly on the other side of the aisle, are surrendering their power to Trump and letting him do whatever in the hell he wants. We had a continuing resolution. There were community projects authorized by each congressperson. I think almost all had community projects in there, and we wiped them out. But Article 1 says we're in charge of the purse, and we come up and make recommendations, and rather than include them in a congressionally ordered continuing resolution, we eliminate them. That makes no sense. We have given up our Article 1 powers, and Trump is just doing whatever he wants, and we don't even question him or challenge him. I wrote a letter to Kristi Noem on February the 14th, and I have not gotten a response to it. I served with her. I should have gotten a response. I wrote her that I inquire about the Department of Homeland Security's immigration enforcement policies, priorities, and communications. And I let her know in the letter that I agree with her that we should get the worst of the worst. She called it the worst of the worst. But there have been conflicting reports on who ICE is picking up and detaining. And I appreciate her letting me know who they picked up, how many of those were child sexual abusers, homicides, or rapists, where those individuals were apprehended and where they were previously in custody of another law enforcement agency, and how many went to Guantanamo Bay and whatever. I appreciate her clarifying the number of immigrants, if she would, who are the worst of the worst and those who have been convicted for murder, rape, and child sexual offenses. This was on February 14. I have not heard from her. It's now 2 months. But she's had plenty of time to put on her cowboy breeches and her cowboy hat and ride on a horse, fortunately not shooting any dogs on the way. She's had time to pose in front of people in prison in El Salvador, dressed as she does with her Rolex watch and looking whatever and talking, using them as a prop. But she doesn't have time to answer a congressional request to state who have they arrested and who are the worst of the worst, and are they getting the worst of the worst. I have to presume her failure to answer is the fact that they're not getting the worst of the worst. And on CNN the other day, they showed a graph, and I don't know their stats, but at least they're given stats, that show that most of the people that were sent to El Salvador were not convicted of any crimes in this country, any felonies. They were not the worst of the worst. They might have had a bunch of ugly tattoos on. I don't know who they were, but they had a right to due process. And when we come into office, we take an oath to support the Constitution and to support the Constitution and our country against all enemies, domestic and foreign. That's not an oath we take just when it's easy. Saying that these people who are all tattooed and maybe they're members of this gang, I don't know. Nobody hardly knows. But that may not be easy in this climate. But due process is important all the time, and it's most important when it's in the worst circumstances, the most difficult circumstances. That's when you have to stand up and abide by your oath. So I appreciate everybody here in uniform, and thank you for what you're doing in protecting the laws of this country. The fact is, our country is at risk right now, and we need to stand up, support our oath, and keep the powers of the Congress as they have been intended, and stop this president from a coup d'etat and an authoritarian takeover. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the more things change, the more they stay the same, unfortunately. When I first got to Congress 2 years ago, the former ranking member said at our first immigration hearing that we Republicans were imagining a border crisis. So, Ms. Carter-Walters, are you imagining a border crisis? How would you respond to that?
And that's why President Trump we almost had a red wave in the United States, because we're tired of the lies, the gaslighting from the Democrat Party. All while everything they're saying right now that Trump is a threat. Everything is a threat. No, they're the threat. The Biden-Harris administration allowed 20 million people to cross that border unvetted and illegally. So no, we are not imagining anything. When I go outside my house and I look from side to side and across the street and I see what I see, and see the gangs and see everybody that's not, well, let me say this, people who I know that's not from my community and people who I know that's not from here. When I see that invasion in my community, then I'm not imagining anything. No, I'm looking at that with my own eyes.
Thank you for sharing that. Sheriff, real quick to you, in your law enforcement experience, it's pretty customary to work with your state and federal law enforcement officials on any number of issues. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, actually, we've done that for years, yes.
Right, so in any given scenario, you back them up, they might provide you with resources. There is an esprit de corps, if you will, between the law enforcement community to work together on crimes that are happening in your community, in your state.
It should be, and it should not be political in any way.
So the interesting thing in your state is that you now have a state attorney general who is presumably the chief law enforcement officer of the state, that is impeding your ability to do your job. Have you ever seen something like that before? Not necessarily on immigration or sanctuary policies, but have you ever seen a state official like that impede local law enforcement to the degree you have right now with these sanctuary policies?
Not in the years that I've been in law enforcement until probably the last 10 years. Things
Mr.
in
Hallman,
Washington State have changed.
Mr. Hallman, are you familiar with 8 U.S.C. 1373?
Yep.
What is it, just to paraphrase, what does it say?
Well, I mean, it's a critical statute when it comes to immigration enforcement, and something that Democrats obviously ignore and disregard like they do every other part of immigration law.
So the statute basically says that You cannot restrict communication between state and local entities and federal immigration authorities. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But that's
yep.
what's happening here.
Though they're not only restricting communications, I mean, let's give another example. Sanctuary jurisdictions are beyond simply complying with detainer requests. You have an example like Newark, New Jersey. You have a mayor, Ras Baraka, who is refusing to even allow a detention facility of 1,000 beds to open. He's doing a permitting nonsense. They don't only not want to comply with detainers, they don't want to detain, even in critical urban areas that are key hubs for removal.
So what's remarkable about this is why would they do that? What would be the policy reason, the logical reason that they would do that?
It's all by design. Again, it's all these urban areas. You're going to start seeing it too. Again, it's not just, hey, we want to keep you in the shadows. We want you to do as you please, live as you please. They want to make each jurisdiction in a flagrant abuse with a middle finger to the White House when it comes to enforcing our law. That's what they're doing. They're dismantling detention, immigration enforcement, and when it comes down to it, there's preventable crimes. We're going to keep seeing them. And until, adequate funding is provided to President Trump and ICE to do mass deportation and everything, it's going to be in our hands too.
Yeah, well, maybe we can start with some funding by restricting the ability of these cities. I mean, if we're giving them grants, what are they going to? Or if we're giving them money, but they're not actually cooperating or helping. I think to the sheriff's point earlier, it's really alarming to me that that sanctuary cities even think that it's acceptable to exist, right? That this is a policy that is not based in reality, that it's an emotional response to the big orange man as a bad guy in the White House. That's kind of where they seem to be going, and that we would not allow the sheriff to do his job to work with our federal partners. And so I think the Congress absolutely has a role here. We absolutely should work to shut this practice down because, as Ms. Carter Walters talked about earlier, she sees it in her community. It is no longer safe. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Knott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major Franklin, just so I'm clear, I haven't been in for the entirety of the question and answers, but I want to ask you, do you believe that illegal immigration is a problem for the country?
Oh, it definitely is a problem, yeah.
Do you believe that the 10 to 15 million or even 20 million people of the last 4 years is a problem for the country?
Yeah, I do. There's no doubt that we have a border problem, and we need policies, because you've heard
yes.
what we're dealing with at the local level once they get to our cities and towns. That's real.
Yes.
And then we have to make decisions on how we best manage it for us in our communities, and what we see is public safety. So this really pains me to not be able to see both sides come together and work within in the brackets of the Constitution to come up with sound border policies and processes so people can become legal. I mean, it is a huge issue, but what we're dealing with at the local level, and Sheriff Wagner and the other sheriffs here, it's a problem. And you said it, Sheriff, the politics. It's difficult.
Well, let me just stop you there. Our side of the aisle is not for legal immigration. Our side of the aisle is for welcoming millions of people here and then trying to offer them legal status without any process or recognition of the existing legal immigrants we have. And the problem that I have is with sanctuary cities like yours in Baltimore, where I personally had experience with detainers not being honored or respected. So in your experience, what is a federal detainer, and do you support exercising those?
Detainers become a problem for us.
What is, as you understand it, what is a federal detainer? I've issued them.
A detainer is pretty much a notice to local law enforcement that they want a particular person, and give us notice when they're going to be released.
Who's already in custody.
Who's already in custody.
So that means, by extension, they have already committed a crime or been arrested for a crime, correct?
Absolutely.
And those detainers, when they're not honored, those people are released without federal law enforcement effectuating an arrest, correct?
I've never experienced that, no.
Well, that's what the detainers, that's what the sanctuary policies are built around. You're not honoring a federal detainer.
Because under my command, the notice went out in a timely fashion, and the federal authorities, be it ICE or another federal agency, were then waiting for that person to be released. But by law, we could not hold them with a detainer. A warrant, yes. A detainer, no.
So just to cut to the chase, you don't honor the detainer. You have someone in your custody who's illegal. You're notified by federal law enforcement that they are here illegally. The detainer says, please hold. Sanctuary policy does not honor the detainer, correct?
Correct. If it's a warrant, we hold.
Exactly. So you have people who have been arrested at the local level. There's a federal instruction to hold them, an illegal immigrant criminal, and you prioritize releasing them rather than working with federal law enforcement. And it's your opinion that that serves your local community, correct?
They paid their debt.
Releasing someone who's here illegally, who has already been arrested. I'm asking the question, sir. It's your testimony that releasing an arrested illegal immigrant criminal effectuates a safety or a safe policy for your community.
When they're released by the order of the court on a specific date and time.
This is what I call an invasive. This is what I call an invasive answer.
That's what we're required to do.
Someone has been arrested in your town who's here illegally, and you want them to be released rather than to work with federal law enforcement. And it's your testimony that makes your community safer.
We work according to the law.
Do you think that being here illegally is consistent with the law?
With the federal law or state law?
Federal law. No. When they commit a crime, they get arrested by your law enforcement agency.
It's a civil process you're talking about.
It is not a civil process. They are not brought into your jail by a civil action.
Will the gentleman yield?
Local police do not have the authority to enforce that federal law.
They have the authority to hold someone when a federal detainer is issued. And that you're skirting the issue. They were in your custody for some other action, correct?
Which they've served their time for, yes.
For some other action. And when you issue a hold, it is a sanctuary policy to let them go, correct?
Sanctuary policy. I'm talking about what I know to be a legal policy.
My time's expired. I think that the point was...
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Well, I'm sure you do.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'd like to enter into the record an article, Police Say ICE Tactics Are Eroding Public Trust in Local Law Enforcement.
From NPR.
From NPR. I have another unanimous consent request to enter into the record an article entitled Immigrant Sanctuary Policies and Crime Reporting Behavior, a multi-level analysis of reports of crime victimization to law enforcement 1980 to 2004. I have another unanimous consent request to enter into the record an article titled The Effects of Sanctuary Policies on Crime and the Economy. And a final one, not a final one, some more, to enter into the record, Can Sanctuary Policies Reduce Domestic Violence? And another one, The Local Effects of Federal Law Enforcement Policies, Evidence from Sanctuary Jurisdictions and Crime. These are all supporting the very real data that shows that cities and towns and states across the country with these policies are safer.
Request, without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the witnesses' time and being here today. It's an easy issue for most of us, at least it is for me. I mean, as a matter of principle, federal law says these folks, once convicted and subject to removal as a matter of federal law, you ought to have cooperation and communication among the various levels of government in order to effectuate the purpose of federal law. That's not a particularly difficult concept. I recognize, I was a state official for 2 decades. I recognize what's essentially a states' rights argument on the other side, the anti-commandeering doctrine and the theory, the idea, the legal principles that there are limits on what the federal government can do to compel states to do things they don't want to do. And I've always kind of thought in this space, the way I've looked at it is that, states and locals probably, as a general matter, have the ability to stand by and not be terribly helpful, but they don't have the ability to actively impede, either by action or omission, the enforcement of federal law. And Sheriff, you're in the middle of the bullseye right now as all this intersects. Do you look at it in a similar way, or how do you draw that line?
Yeah, I look at it's very similar, but the problem that we face in Washington State and sanctuary policies. I mean, we talk about Chicago. I'll go back to Chicago. We had an illegal immigrant come to Chicago with his wife and kill her in our county, right? A few years ago. It affects us on a huge scale to not be able to communicate with another law enforcement entity. We got to stop these things that's called defund the police, and now because one side has control or whatever, now all of a sudden we have a situation where ICE is the bad guy, and now we got to get rid of ICE. We're a federal, state, local, federal should be working together on all these for law enforcement perspective to find solutions for our communities.
Amen, Sheriff. And I feel for you. I've been there. I've shared with this committee, the full committee, I think it was just a few weeks ago, a case we had a number of years ago where an illegal alien was convicted of DUI in California a number of years earlier and then came to our jurisdiction and some years later drove drunk again and killed a sheriff's deputy in the course of doing that. And I went back and double-checked prior to this hearing, and sure enough, there's at least no record that the California authorities, when they released that fellow from their state jurisdiction or local, I don't know what it was, had ever communicated with ICE. There was no detainer request, no record. And so, you know, what happened in California didn't stay in California. It came to my state and killed a young law enforcement officer. So we have an interest in each other's handling of this, and it's perhaps a profound interest. I want to ask you a question. You know, I'm lucky I live in a state that's, my situation was just opposite of yours. While I served as our Attorney General, I had some local jurisdictions that wanted to become safe and welcoming, as they euphemistically put it. And I wound up working with our legislature. We got a statute enacted that preempted all of that local authority and, in fact, affirmatively obligates them to comply with federal law, to communicate with federal agents. And we fixed our problem, but I empathize you're not in a posture you can get that done. I want to ask you the other side of the coin. This is a little out of scope, so I'll start with Mr. Howman, and then if we have time, Mr. Wagner and whoever. So it just strikes me there's a strange juxtaposition here. On the one hand, the feds are limited in how we can put guardrails around state decisions in terms of becoming sanctuaries, non-cooperation. But on the other hand, the federal government has almost entirely preempted states that want to cooperate, that want to enforce their own state law as to immigration, consistent, not in conflict with federal law. We said you can't do that, and there's Supreme Court cases on point largely. That's not a constitutional function. It's a function of decisions made by this body. It's statutory preemption. And I'm just wondering if, you know, sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, and as we're trying to figure out how we fix the sanctuary problem, should we also be talking about easing up on preemption so that states or locals that want to be helpful in immigration enforcement of federal law, parallel enforcement, enactment, enforcement of state laws, should be able to do that? And Mr. Howman, what do you think about that?
Well, again, under President Trump, one of the key things he's done, I mean, it's not a new or unique authority that would be expanded, but again, 287 agreements.
I know, but it's not the same. Yeah. 287G requires a partnership and agreement between the federal government and the states, so when you have a hostile federal administration, they just stop agreeing. I'm talking about actually easing some of the preemption provisions that are in the INA so that states that want to enact and enforce laws that are consistent
Mr. Chairman,
with federal policies
this is time. We just need to be consistent. We just need to be consistent, Mr. Chairman. If you're going to cut off my witness, then I expect that you would. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've just got a UC request.
All right, go ahead.
These are 5 district court opinions which say that it is unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment to hold someone beyond the term of their sentence on a mere detainer as opposed to a warrant.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Mr. Grossman.
America is so generous in the number of people we allow in our country. I don't think it's pointed out enough. We have I think over the last 3 years, an average of about 860,000 people every year who are naturalized citizens, who are sworn in as new citizens and did things the right way. And that's in addition to, we let in about 470,000 people on student visas, about 900,000 people who are on citizens on work visas. So we're very generous. Nevertheless, we just got through a 4-year period in which we had a president, and I have sympathy for people as they're kicked out of the country because they might have been listening to our president at that time. Our president, in essence, encouraged 10 million people to enter the country in the last 4 years, knowing that eventually if we had a law-abiding president who respected the law, we were going to have to remove this 10 million people, and which we should do because it's an insult, it's a slap in the face to anybody who came here legally, as they will quickly tell you, and you're going to get too much of a quick change in America, our cultural change, if you allow that many people in the country that quickly. So in any event, one of the things that concerns me is the mindset of people who really encourage breaking of the law. And we have the problem in Wisconsin, where we have a governor, we have a mayor of Milwaukee, who is not being helpful to ICE like they should be. But do any of you folks, I guess we can start with Mr. Wagner at the end, have you had any experience with these people who apparently want us to ignore our immigration laws and what goes on in their contorted mind? Why they can't just say, like, 850,000 a year, get in line, do it legally?
Yeah, I can't speak to someone's mind, obviously, but I can tell you that we have those conversations within my employment and my people that work for me that have been through the process, that have family members that have come here, some of them potentially their parents or relatives before illegally, and they're generational now. So there's a lot of those kind of discussions that happen, and there is some insulted people that have done it the right way that don't feel that this is correct.
Yes. Mr. Hallman, have you come across these rather bizarre people who have been encouraging people to break the law, and bizarre public officials who don't want these people removed? Can you imagine what's going on in their mind?
The left, you obviously have the immigration lawyer industrial complex that is really licking their chops over everything that's going on right now. It's interesting to see that even on social media or every public debate arena, all these lawyers and activists and everything, all they seem to care about is body art and other things like that as defending them from being unable to be removed and stuff, blasting obviously conditions in other countries. It's just everybody on the other side either has a financial interest in it or their interest when it comes to their extreme worldview of transforming our country.
We do have, I hate to say, businessmen in my own district who want a lot more immigrants above the legal amount because they don't want to give their employees a raise. And I think that's a motive that's going on out here, because they know if we got a lot of people here illegally, they'll be able to work for less and they won't have to give the average American a raise. And I think that's a motivating factor too. We got to get the view from Chicago. Ms. Carter Walters, do you have a view as to why these people want to encourage people to break the law?
Well, we believe that because the Democrat Party have a 21% approval rating, they need voters, first of all. And it's disgusting to hear that they're advocating for people who broke the law to come to get here, and to hear them talk about their rights, all while infringing on our rights as true American citizens, is disgusting. And that's why we, the people, trust President Trump, because he listened to us. He's a president of common sense, and who in their right mind will be pushing. Now they see that 80% want mass deportation of everybody. Like you said, when you allow millions of people to come over here illegally, saturating America, then that means that we have to get them out of here and then bring them back and let them come in the correct way. And this, under the Biden and Harris administration, they opened the border, and under President Trump, he's fixing the problem. So we, the American citizen, we are okay.
Ms. Carter, Walters, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the ranking members quite insisted on this point.
Yes,
So I will have to ask you
Fairness in the
to
committee is
conclude
appropriate.
and recognize Mr. Onder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all the witnesses here today. You know, less than a week after I was sworn in as a new member of Congress, one of my 18-year-old constituents was sexually assaulted on a Lyft ride, which was driven by an illegal alien who had overstayed his tourist visa. 5 days later, this same illegal alien again kidnapped and assaulted another one of my constituents, this time while we're driving an Uber. Thankfully, our local St. Charles County, Missouri Police Department arrested him 2 days later, and this violent illegal alien faces multiple felony charges, including second-degree sexual assault and third-degree kidnapping. And while he's being held on a $250,000 bond, ICE could issue a detainer requesting St. Charles County PD to notify ICE before he's released from custody so that ICE can take him into custody. And I have no doubt that in St. Charles County, the police department will cooperate. In addition, Missouri has a law which I actually passed in 2008 banning sanctuary jurisdictions, and at the same time requiring local police to cooperate with ICE in enforcement of our immigration laws. But of course, and that's why we're here today, in other states and jurisdictions, some police departments routinely deny these ICE detainers, returning violent illegal aliens like this rideshare driver back into our communities. Sanctuary cities are dangerous because they release safety threats back into our communities, and of course, Tom, our new immigration czar, Tom Homan, recognized that he will make fighting this a priority. Mr. Hellman, if a sanctuary city ignores or denies an ICE detainer, does ICE eventually apprehend the criminal alien?
It obviously depends on the situation, and obviously ICE has resource constraints and their ability to comply with, to issue every request and how it works. I mean, the operational roadblocks that ICE is currently hitting, based on the accounts that are running dry, the money they're having to backfill.
Yes,
they're not even close when it comes to capability at the moment.
So that would be sometimes called an at-large arrest. Mm-hmm. And why is that more dangerous to ICE officers and to the aliens and to the community than if the jurisdiction simply honored an ICE detainer?
I mean, because they have to go out in the field and conduct a removal effort that is complex. You're already seeing it, too, the other side of groups on the left. We're out there leaking pending operations of them going to raid a house because they don't want it to happen when they're putting them at risk. Every enforcement operation that happens out there is at risk for them. 98% of illegal aliens are currently roaming free. We can't even track them with a monitoring device, or they're not even in our custody. We're just, like going out into the abyss and trying to find these people and putting their lives at risk. It's dangerous.
And do these illegal aliens who are released, do they sometimes reoffend?
Oh, of course, absolutely. I mean, and then the thing is, too, it's when it comes to any crime that's committed by an illegal alien is 100% preventable. We could have prevented every single one. You cannot compare them to U.S. citizen crime rates. It's impossible.
And, proponents of sanctuary jurisdictions sometimes argue that honoring ICE detainers, cooperating with ICE, will erode confidence in the community and the local law enforcement, make people afraid to come forward and report crimes. What say you to that?
Show me one example of it. I want to hear one example of a person that was arrested for reporting a crime, and we have legal immigration pathways that do protect witnesses and things like that. Show me one example of it. I still have not heard one from any law enforcement officer.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would, without objection, I'd like to offer, for the record, three studies. One quote, another fatally flawed study on illegal alien crime from the Cato Institute. Another SCAAP data suggests illegal aliens commit crime at a much higher rate than citizens and lawful immigrants. And a third, Cato Institute's analysis on illegal alien crime, latest in a long history of poor scholarship. I think there's sometimes this narrative that illegal aliens are more law-abiding than American citizens, and I think that is truly indeed false.
objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. I think Ms. Walters, said it best that we had a secure border under President Trump in his first term, that Joe Biden opened the floodgates, and now President Trump is cleaning up Joe Biden's mess. So that was very well said. I'd like to begin with Major Franklin. Thank you for being here. Do you know what percentage of illegal aliens reside in sanctuary cities, roughly?
No, I don't.
It's about 56%, rough numbers. And is it your testimony, and I've got your written testimony here, that local law enforcement should not dedicate time and resources towards information sharing and detainer requirements?
It's about, generally speaking, yes, it's about the context.
It's about the context. So I'll take that.
Specific circumstances, yeah.
So there's some criminal illegal aliens they should
I think
release.
it's more about having good policies on how and when the communication will occur.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Let me ask you, do sanctuary city policies and mass illegal immigration help American citizens enter the labor force? Yes or no?
I don't know. That's not my area of expertise.
Okay, you don't know. Do sanctuary cities and mass illegal immigration help lower housing costs? Yes or no? You don't know? Yep. Do they help reduce the strain on public services or public benefits? You don't know? Okay. Do you think that illegal aliens, you're saying that they should have safe harbor essentially in our cities? Should they have free access to medical care?
They should have access to medical care.
Should they have taxpayer subsidized access to medical care?
Depends upon the circumstances, I guess. I don't know.
What about taxpayer subsidized education?
It's not my area of expertise.
Okay, public housing?
Not my
You don't know? You're inviting them to come into our cities, but you don't have a position on what should happen to them then, other than that illegal aliens should
I'm not
be
inviting
detained.
anyone.
Well, you essentially are, actually. Would you describe Baltimore as a safe city?
What's your definition of safe?
I'm asking you, is Baltimore a safe city? Is it the kind of city that you would want to raise a family and maybe go jogging in without having to be worried about being murdered or raped?
I grew up in Baltimore. My family is in Baltimore. My mother still lives in the same house in West Baltimore.
Is it a safe city?
60+ years, so the answer is definitely yes.
You think Baltimore is a safe city?
Of course it is.
Okay, do you know what the homicide rate is in Baltimore?
Exactly no.
It's about 35 per 100,000. Do you know what the homicide rate is in the rest of the United States?
No, I don't.
I can tell you that the homicide rate in Baltimore is about 5 times the national average. Do you know how Baltimore's robbery rate compares to the rest of the United States?
At the moment, no, I don't.
You don't? It's about 8.4 times the national average. Do you know how Baltimore's assault rate compares to the national average?
No, I don't.
It's about 3.4 times higher. Does that sound like a safe city to you?
Safe to me and my family members.
So that's safe to you? 5 times higher than the national average for homicides? That's a safe city?
Perception.
It's what? Excuse me?
I said it's what for instance, it's perception. It's what you feel as a resident in Baltimore City.
If you're murdered, I don't think it matters what you feel, do you? Is it your testimony that the safety
Baltimore City
depends on how
city.
people feel?
To me, Baltimore City is a safe city.
To you, it's a safe city. I don't think it's safe to the people who are being murdered every single weekend there. Let me ask you, picking up on Mr. Knott's questioning, do you think that it's appropriate for local law enforcement to not honor immigration detainers and to release criminal illegal aliens into our cities?
We go by what the courts dictate.
Well, I'm asking you if you think that that's an appropriate response. You arrest an illegal alien for a crime. That person has an immigration detainer. You think that it's appropriate to release them? Yes or no?
When the courts say release them, yes.
Do you think that keeps Baltimore safe?
If it's done appropriately, yes.
No, so you do.
Yes.
You think that that's a good way to keep.
When it's done appropriately according to the law, we cannot sidestep the law because we carry badges. We have to go by the law.
My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Is he Googling, I see?
Yes, because there are a lot of things that are being said on the other side that aren't true. So I wanted to respond to my colleague who asked for one case where somebody was arrested for reporting a crime. So here is one from the Detroit Free Press. It is entitled, "She Told Michigan Cops She Was Attacked, Now She Faces Deportation by the Feds." This is exactly what we are talking about. When you undermine
General Lady
public
chided
trust,
me for allowing
because
our member
it's true, Mr. Chairman,
to stray beyond an introduction. I'm
Correct.
going to enforce the rules
Yes,
uniformly,
I hope
which
we
requires
do.
me to limit your comments to the unanimous consent request.
Yes,
that
I
you have
appreciate
made,
that.
and without objection, it is
I
so
appreciate
ordered.
that, Mr. Chairman. I've just been frustrated by the lack of uniform enforcement of our committee's rules. In the full committee, if somebody goes over on the other side, the
I did
chairman
enforce those
allows
rules
the other side to go over, and you cut off my witness. So
When
yes,
the
I'm
gentle
annoyed by that,
When the
and I
gentle
yield
lady
back. Thank you, Mr.
objected
Chairman.
to our member straying beyond biographical details on an introduction, I
Yes, you did.
sustained her
Yes, you
objection.
did, and that's what I've always
and
believed
called the
about you, Mr.
member
Chairman.
to order.
That's exactly why
But now
I'm
the gentle lady
disappointed
violates
that this is-
exactly the same
Well,
rule
it seems that
for
it's only
herself,
being
and that
enforced in
seems
certain
rather
ways. So
inconsistent.
I'm
to me.
yielding back, but I do want to register my formal
Without objection,
frustration with the way that the chairman has been enforcing the rules
Well,
in
I'm
this
trying
particular
to
committee.
enforce the
I yield
rules
back,
as
Mr.
you're
Chairman.
breaking them, Madam. Without objection, the unanimous consent is requested. Major Franklin, where do you currently live?
I currently live in Florida.
Oh, in Florida. Well, I can't say that I blame you. Ms. Carter Walters, where do you live?
Chicago.
So you're living with the problems created by the policies that have been advocated by officials like Major Franklin, who has since fled those conditions. Did I pretty much have that correct?
Yes, it's funny because most of the people who leave Chicago, they usually leave to and go to a red state, but yet and still they advocate
Well,
for
as Major Franklin has. You testified that Chicago has cut law enforcement in order to divert those funds to support the illegal population. Ms. Carter Walters, why do people in Chicago put up with that?
Well, I think that we know that we can see what's happening and we know something is wrong, but people are just so used to the corruption in Chicago, and we just usually say that's just how it goes in Chicago. But now we have Chicago Flips Red, who's standing up to the corruption and saying no more.
The Democrats say that a city that refuses to enforce federal law should nevertheless continue to receive federal law enforcement funds, presumably so that they can divert them to support the illegal population. Does that make any sense to you?
No.
To me either. Sheriff Wagner, we've heard from the Democrats that, and their witness, that sanctuary laws make our communities safer by releasing criminals back into our communities rather than obeying the federal law that requires their deportation. What's your professional opinion?
I think it's wrong. I think we need to assist each other.
Do these sanctuary laws make our cities safer or less safe?
Less safe.
But the Democrats say that people in the immigrant community are more likely to report crimes in sanctuary jurisdictions. If I knew a criminal that I'm reporting is going to be released right back into my neighborhood after I've reported the crime, I think I'd be a lot less likely to report it, not more. What's your view?
I agree.
Ms. Carter Walters, what's your opinion?
Excuse me?
Do sanctuary laws make our cities more safe or less safe?
less safe.
Mr. Holman, how about you?
It's not even a question. Sanctuary policies put the American people in danger. They undermine the rule of law. They must be stopped. Full speed ahead.
All right, so the Democrats and their witness tell us that we're safer if we release criminals back into our communities. The Republicans and their witnesses say the opposite. I think I'll just let that speak for itself. Sheriff Wagner, the Democratic witness testified that honoring an ICE detainer is unduly burdensome. Do you agree?
I don't believe they are.
Well, how does honoring an ICE detainer differ from having to track down and arrest a criminal alien once they've been released under these sanctuary policies?
You pretty much just explained that. They get released, and it's just harder to get them, hard to go after them, and a lot more dangerous, obviously.
So the ICE detainer simply basically requires a phone call to ICE saying, we've got this individual in our custody, they're about to be released, you've got 48 hours to come and get them.
Correct.
Okay, so that takes about, 15 seconds?
I couldn't time it, but I...
And then once that individual has been released because that phone call was not made because of these sanctuary laws, what's involved in apprehending that criminal at that point?
Yeah, well, it depends on who the criminal is, obviously, what they're wanted for, those kind of things. But anytime you go outside and give a person an avenue of escape or a determination not to be caught or taken into custody, you inherently take on a huger risk. I mean, and that's just the reality of what we deal with in law enforcement, not just ICE agents, everybody in law enforcement.
So obviously it risks the lives of our law enforcement officers. What does it do to innocent bystanders?
It's increased for everybody. That's just the reality.
But that 15-second phone call is just too burdensome to these woke public officials.
I'll let you comment on that.
The ranking member tells us that the association that represents big city police chiefs supports sanctuary policy. Sheriff Wagner, who appoints these big city police chiefs?
As far as I'm aware, they're done by a mayor or a council.
Basically woke Democratic officials.
Correct. Well, I shouldn't say correct on the woke. I don't know.
Well, great. Well, anyway, thank you very much for your testimony. That concludes my questions, and that concludes the committee's questions. So that, in turn, concludes the committee hearing. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. And without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you. You did awesome. See, you was scared. You did awesome.